Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 on Wednesday, the 10th of January. My name is Brian Liddy and I'm here with a run through of today's news for you from Broadcasting Scotland. Our routine or daily Ukraine update, day 686. Two drones hit and set fire to a fuel facility in the Russian city of Oryol, 230 miles south of Moscow and 137 miles from the Ukrainian border, according to the local governor, Andrei Klitschkov. The Kremlin said the Russian military would do everything in its power to tackle an increase in Ukrainian shelling of the border city of Belgorod, which is a staging point for Russia's invasion forces and has come under shelling and drone attacks for months. The White House said Russia had launched multiple missile source. The White House said Russia had launched multiple missiles sourced from North Korea into Ukraine on the 6th of January, and the US would demand at the UN Security Council that Russia be held accountable. North Korea's apparent export of short-range ballistic missiles, or SRBMs, to Russia violates UN law. Joint statement signed by the US, UK, EU, Australia, Germany, Canada, and other partner nations said, "We are deeply concerned about the security implications that this cooperation has in Europe, on the North Korean peninsula, across the Indo-Pacific region, and around the world. We condemn in the strongest possible terms North Korea's export and Russia's procurement of North Korea's ballistic missiles, as well as Russia's use of these missiles against Ukraine." Ukraine has been repelling Russian cyber attacks on state payment systems for the second week in a row, senior lawmaker Danilo Hetmantsev said. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is scheduled to deliver a special address to the World Economic Forum, or the WEF, in Davos next week. The conflict in the Middle East is set to dominate the annual forum, held this year under the theme Rebuilding Trust. Ukraine's power grid operator said severe winter weather had left more than 1,000 towns and villages without electricity in 9 regions, as the energy system has been weakened by Russian strikes. Ukraine has imported electricity from neighbouring Romania and Slovakia. Russian investigators said they had arrested 3 people over heating outages south of Moscow that have sent regional officials scrambling to restore services. Authorities blamed the breakdown on failures at the boiler plant owned by a private ammunition factory. The deputy head of the local administration was also detained. Sweden is providing about 50 million krona to the NATO assistance fund for Ukraine, the Swedish embassy in Kyiv wrote on X, previously Twitter. Politico is reporting that Hungary might lift its veto over EU aid to Ukraine if the funding is reviewed each year. According to Politico, 3 EU diplomatic sources said Budapest indicated it might withdraw its opposition if the European Council unanimously approves the funding on a yearly basis, allowing Viktor Orban to extract further concessions in the annual negotiations. Air Force spokesperson Yuri Inat has told Ukrainian TV that Ukraine has a shortage of anti-aircraft guided missiles after recent Russian attacks. Inat said Ukraine has spent a considerable reserve on those 3 attacks that took place. And now moving on to the latest from Israel and Gaza. A total of 23,357 Palestinians have been killed and 59,410 have been injured in Israeli strikes on Gaza since the 7th of October, the Gaza Health Ministry said. 147 Palestinians were killed and 243 injured in the past 24 hours. 1.9 million people, or nearly 85% of the total population of Gaza, are estimated to have been displaced from their homes. Only 15 out of Gaza's 36 hospitals are partially functional. 330 Palestinians have also been killed in the Israeli-occupied West Bank over the same period, including 84 children, and nearly 4,000 people have been injured by Israeli security forces during that time. In a press conference, the World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus has said there are nearly insurmountable obstacles to delivering humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip, saying the situation was indescribable. He said 6 planned missions to northern Gaza had been cancelled because Israel had rejected requests and not given assurances of safe passage, adding that a mission planned for today had also had to be cancelled. The UK has warned of severe consequences after US and UK warships were forced to repel a barrage of 20 Houthi rockets, drones and cruise missiles fired at ships in the Red Sea. American and UK forces say they shot down 18 drones and 3 missiles on Tuesday. Italian Defence Minister Guido Crosetto has said that Yemen's Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping must be stopped without triggering a new war. The US State Department has said that the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is to make an additional previously unannounced stop in Bahrain during his tour of the region. Blinken met the Palestinian President, Mahmoud Abbas, in Ramallah in the Israeli-occupied West Bank this morning. The IDF announced the death of another member of Israel's troops inside Gaza, taking the total toll of the ground offensive to 186. The Israeli military has said that 1,065 of its soldiers have been injured in Gaza. Israel's military claims to have uncovered more than 15 underground tunnel shafts in the area of Maghazi in central Gaza, where it says that its troops directed airstrikes that killed several terrorists. In Khan Yunis, it claimed that in battles in the area over the last day, dozens of terrorist operatives were killed by IDF troops, adding that a total of approximately 150 terror attacks were struck by IDF troops over the last day. Israel's military has also said that it has again struck at what it described as Hezbollah terrorist targets inside southern Lebanon. The Palestinian news agency Wafa has reported this morning that Israel has detained a further 26 Palestinians in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. This brings the total number of detainees since the 7th of October to more than 5,780. Israeli politician Nissim Vaturi has reiterated his call for Gaza to be burned down, saying there are no innocents there, referring to Palestinians still in Gaza after repeated orders from the Israeli military for them to flee. Vaturi said, 100,000 remain. I have no mercy for those who are still there. We need to eliminate them. The comments come ahead of a hearing on Thursday at the International Court of Justice, where South Africa has accused Israel of genocide in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet will meet again at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, that's 5 p.m. GMT, to discuss Israeli plans for the Gaza Strip when the war has finished. In our next item, Rishi Sunak has announced a plan to grant an unprecedented blanket acquittal for hundreds of post office operators wrongly convicted in the post office scandal. The announcement was made at Prime Minister's questions, and officials later confirmed that legislation would be introduced within weeks, with a view to granting the acquittal this year. Sunak said the aim would be to make sure those convicted are swiftly exonerated and compensated. The announcement, which comes less than a week after the last episode of the ITV drama Mr. Bates versus the Post Office was broadcast, could finally bring a rapid end to the long fight for compensation by an estimated 900 people who were wrongly convicted of theft. The bill, which is believed to be the first time Parliament will be asked to overturn the verdicts of multiple courts, comes in response to alarm at the slow pace at which staff have been exonerated by the criminal review process. Sunak's official spokesperson said the legislation would clear people on a blanket basis, clearing people's names and making sure they access the compensation they rightly deserve as quickly as possible, instead of waiting for years through the courts to wade through hundreds of convictions. Setting out details of the plan in question to an urgent comments question, Kevin Hollenrake, the business minister with responsibility for postal services, said, "I do not pretend to the House that this is a foolproof device, but it is a proportionate one which respects the ordeal with which these people have already suffered. Anyone who has had their conviction overturned will be given an upfront offer of £600,000 or allowed to proceed with a more detailed assessment process if they feel they are owed more. Those who are part of a separate group litigation will be offered £75,000 each. The latter group, numbering 555 post office operators, received a settlement from the post office in 2019 following a High Court case, but much of the £43 million payout went to legal costs. Those in the group who believe they are entitled to more than £75,000 can also go through the assessment process. The Post Office, which has the power to instigate prosecutions, prosecuted more than 900 branch owner-operators who were wrongly accused of taking money from their businesses between 1999 and 2015, based on information from the faulty Horizon accounting software. While the Post Office eventually conceded fault, as of December, just 142 appeal case reviews had been completed. Of these, 93 convictions were overturned, with 54 upheld, withdrawn or refused permission to appeal. First Minister Hamza Yousaf has written to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak today, calling on joint working to ensure a UK-wide approach is taken to exonerate those wrongly convicted of criminal offences as a result of the Post Office Horizon IT system. The estimated cost of the HS2 line from London to Birmingham has ballooned to as much as £66 billion, John Thompson, HS2's executive chair, has told MPs. Mr Thompson told the Transport Select Committee on Wednesday that the current estimate for the first phase of the line could add between £8 billion and £10 billion to the current top-end estimate of £56.6 billion. The discrepancy in estimates is because the current £56.6 billion price tag the government and HS2 have been quoting is in 2019 prices and does not reflect the jump in inflation after the coronavirus pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Thompson's testimony comes only months after Rishi Sunak announced at the Conservative Party conference in October that he would be axing the planned HS2 line north of Birmingham, citing cost concerns as the driving factor. The cost of the high-speed rail project has risen repeatedly in the last decade, with the line from London to Birmingham forecast to cost £19.4 billion in 2013. Since then, there have been a number of revisions, including the last one in November, where HS2 revealed that it now estimated the cost of the line to be between £49 billion and £57 billion. Thompson told MPs that bringing the estimate for 2019 prices up to 2023-24 prices would be adding somewhere between £8 billion and £10 billion further to the cost. Construction inflation over the last 3 years has been 27%. Steel has risen by 47%, rebar 53%, and concrete by 48%. The government currently has a policy in which it only updates the prices for big infrastructure projects at spending reviews, meaning the HS2 Phase 1 cost has stayed at a level put forward in September 2019, when Sajid Javid was Chancellor. Thompson was critical of this process, saying it created hassle for the organisation in converting all invoices and contracts into 2019 prices. The HS2 boss said there were 4 main reasons for the steep cost increases over the years, including the increase in inflation and revisions to scope of the project since it first received parliamentary approval, with changes including more tunnelling through the Chilterns. He added that poor delivery by HS2 and its contractors on some of the major tunnelling and bridge projects along the line had added to costs. Thompson said the fourth driver of cost increases was down to systemic problems with the way the country delivered large infrastructure projects, claiming that budgets were often set before the true scale of the works were known. Excuse me. A new report by the TUC has shown that families' budgets would be £750 a year better off if real disposable income had grown in line with other leading economies. The UK is now the only G7 economy where real household disposable income per head hasn't recovered to its pre-pandemic levels. New figures by the Scottish Retail Consortium, the SRC, also show that sales in December were far below last year's intake, highlighting lower levels of household disposable income. Sales in Scotland increased by 1.9% over the 5 weeks from November 26th to December 30th, compared with December 2022, when they had grown by 11.3%. With the festive period proving difficult for household family budgets and businesses, the upcoming year also looks to provide economic challenges. The Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, forecasts that real house disposable income per head in Britain will fall by an additional 3.4% by the end of the first quarter of 2024. Commenting, the SNP's economy spokesperson, Drew Hendry MP, said, "This Westminster-made cost of living crisis has impacted countless households and thousands of businesses across Scotland, with far too many people suffering under sky-high mortgages, energy bills and food prices. Neither the Tories or the Labour Party are offering any real solutions to the ongoing crisis the cost of, forgive me, I'll read that again. Neither the Tories nor the Labour Party are offering any real solution to the ongoing cost of living crisis. Instead, they promise more welfare cuts and further Brexit losses." Whilst the SNP government is helping families in Scotland with the council tax freeze and Scottish child payment, the Westminster government has hammered households with Tory cuts, Brexit and economic incompetence. The Scottish Parliament urgently needs full powers over the economy so Scotland can act when Westminster refuses. He went on to say, "Westminster is wrecking the economy and cannot be trusted to act in Scotland's best interests. It is only the SNP who are standing up for Scotland and working towards an economy that works for all." While temperatures in Scotland fall to below freezing, a new report heating company ERA has highlighted energy failures of the Westminster government, showing almost 4 million people plan to turn their heating off completely and endure the dangerous cold. The ERA survey has shown that 65% of bill payers across the UK have considered or have already turned down their heating this winter, with 3.7 million people saying they would turn it off entirely. Scotland produces 6 times more gas than it consumes, and 2/3 of our electricity comes from renewable sources in Scotland. The SNP have questioned why Scots continue to face extortionate energy prices despite Scotland being an energy-rich nation. The SNP Energy Security and Net Zero spokesperson, Dave Duggan MP, said, "This shocking report reveals the reality of Westminster's cost of living crisis, which is leaving millions of families facing a shocking choice between heating and eating." He went on to say, "It also highlights the consequences of decades of failed energy policy from Westminster governments we haven't voted for. For too long, the UK Treasury has raked in the profits that Scotland's natural resources have generated while seeing nothing in return." He went on to say that given Scotland's abundance of natural resources and the fact that we're leading the way in the UK on renewable energy, we shouldn't be paying extortionate energy prices. Scotland has the energy, we just need the powers. In a debate in Holyrood this evening, Colette Stevenson, MSP for East Kilbride, called out the UK government's decision to close the Foreign Office site in East Kilbride, accusing Westminster of betraying the community. In the debate, Ms Stevenson highlighted the unexpected nature of this decision, drawing attention to the UK government's declaration on government reform, which commits to relocating jobs and areas of activity across government to places including East Kilbride. Around 1,000 staff currently work at the Abercrombie House, the base for the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office in the area, and its removal will equate to a £30 million hit to the local economy. Commenting, SNP MSP for East Kilbride, Colette Stevenson, said, "It beggars belief that Westminster is betraying the community of East Kilbride at the time of a cost of living crisis, which is entirely the result of damaging Tory policies. The removal of the FCDO headquarters will be devastating for hard-working families across my constituency. But another broken promise will hardly come as a surprise to those who have already suffered greatly under the twin disasters of austerity and Brexit. She went on to say, the utter disregard with which Westminster holds the needs and concerns of the people of Scotland shows the urgent need for Scotland to take its future back into our hands. As long as we remain part of broken Brexit Britain, Westminster will continue to break promises to the people of Scotland. Only with independence is a brighter, more prosperous future possible. Politicians from Germany's far-right Alternative für Deutschland, the AfD party, including a personal aide to its leader, Alice Weidel, met the head of the right-wing extremist Identitarian movement and neo-Nazi activists to discuss a master plan for mass deportations in the event of the party coming to power, according to media reports. Investigative outlet Corrective Today reported on a meeting which took place last November at a countryside hotel on the outskirts of Potsdam. It is likely to feed the debate over whether the AfD should be banned due to growing concerns that it poses a fundamental threat to German democracy. Feeding discontent over immigration, the AfD is polling in first place in all 5 of Germany's eastern states, 3 of which are holding elections later this year. While both the Conservative Christian Democratic Union, the CDU, and the Liberal Pro-Business Free Democratic Party, the FDP, have, for now, ruled out entering coalitions with the party. Its presence at the meeting suggests a far-right organisation with its eye on political gains in the near future. Invitations reported on by Corrective described the meeting as an opportunity to present an overall concept in the sense of a master plan. The meeting was attended not only by 2 state and municipal level AfD politicians, but also one active member of the Bundestag named Gerrit Hoy, as well as Roland Hartwig, a former MP who has acted as a personal aide to Weidel since September 2022. One party branch of the AfDs has described Hartwig as being tasked with the party's strategic positioning. The AfD politicians met with Martin Sellner, who has been given the task of introducing the master plan. Sellner is a key figure in the pan-European New Right, who in 2019 was permanently barred from entering the UK because of his extremist views. The Identitarian movement's Austrian branch, previously led by Sellner, openly opposes the idea of multicultural societies and expounds the conspiracy theory of a great replacement to replace Europe's white population with people from Africa and the Middle East. The Identitarian movement is on a list of organisations whose membership of the AfD considers incompatible with party membership, and the party has denied ties to the movement in the past. However, in recent years the AfD has done little to distance itself from the activist network. One key idea that Sellner has been trying to push into the political mainstream is remigration, that is, the forceful return of migrants to their countries of origin via mass deportations of asylum seekers and German passport-holding citizens who Sellner describes as non-assimilated, rapidly growing parallel societies. The AfD's gradual transformation from an economically liberal anti-European party into what many believe to be a far-right outfit is not new. In the 3 eastern states where the party could triumph at elections this year, that's Saxony, Saxony-Anhalt and Thuringia, the party has been classed as certified right-wing extremist by the German domestic spy agency, allowing its covert surveillance and potentially even infiltration. The party, however, denies that it is extremist. Post-war Germany defines itself as a military democracy, and there have been calls for a debate about whether the Constitutional Court should consider banning the AfD. A new report published today by the independent research firm Rhodium Group has found that climate-altering pollution from greenhouse gases declined by nearly 2% in the United States in 2023, though not fast enough to meet President Biden's targets. The report said that while the decline was a step in the right direction, it is far below the rate needed to meet the president's pledge to cut US emissions in half by 2030 compared to 2005 levels. Absent other changes, absent other changes, the US is on track to cut greenhouse gas emissions by about 40% below 2005 levels by the end of the decade, said Ben King, Associate Director at Rhodium and lead author of the study. The report said US carbon emissions declined by 1.9% last year. Emissions are down 17.2% from 2005. To reach Biden's goal, emissions would have to decline at a rate more than triple the 2023 figure and be sustained at that level every year until 2030. Increased economic activity, including more energy production and greater use of cars, trucks and airplanes, can be associated with higher pollution, although there is not always a direct correlation. The US economy grew by a projected 2.4% in 2023, according to the Conference Board, a business research group. Last year's relatively mild winter and continued declines in power generation from coal-fired plants drove down emissions in the US power and building sector, the report said. While carbon emissions declined overall, some ominous signs also began to appear in 2023, the report said. Natural gas generation grew more than twice as fast as renewables in 2023 compared to 2022, and while solar installations were on track for another record year, installations of wind turbines were down compared to 2022 and 2021. President Biden and congressional Democrats passed the most sweeping climate law in US history in 2022, but effects of the law, known as the Inflation Reduction Act, are just beginning to be felt and are unlikely to have a significant impact on emissions for a few years. The climate law, passed with only Democratic votes, authorises nearly $375 billion in tax credits and other incentives to spur investors to accelerate clean energy such as solar and wind power, speeding the transition away from the burning of fossil fuels such as oil, coal and gas that largely cause climate change. In the House of Commons today, SNP MP Joanna Cherry, KC, introduced a 10-minute rule bill which would give the Scottish Parliament the powers to amend the role of Scotland's law officers. If passed, it would enable Holyrood to put right a historical anomaly by splitting the role of the Lord Advocate into two separate jobs, public prosecutor and government legal advisor. Currently, the Lord Advocate's role as head of the systems of criminal prosecution and investigation of deaths in Scotland is protected from modification by Section 29 of the Scotland Act. The bill will receive a second reading on the 24th of March. Commenting, Joanna Cherry, KC MP, said, "The role and function of Scotland's Chief Law Officer is reserved to Westminster. The straitjacket of the Scotland Act has prevented the Scottish Parliament from modernising the post, as it might have done since 1999, by splitting the dual roles of providing independent legal advice to the government and that of the head of the prosecution service in Scotland. This would avoid any conflict of interest, whether real or perceived." She went on to say that all major political parties in Scotland have called for a review of the role of the Lord Advocate. There is widespread support for splitting the roles, and I trust that my bill will have cross-party backing when it comes before the Commons today. New analysis of European electoral and polling data published today has found that adopting right-wing policies on issues such as immigration and the economy does not help centre-left parties win votes. The analysis shows that centre-left parties promising to be tough on immigration or public spending are unlikely to attract potential voters on the right, but risk alienating existing progressive supporters. Voters tend to prefer the original to the copy, said Tariq Abu Chadi, an associate professor of European politics at the University of Oxford and the co-author of the Progressive Politics Research Network, that's a PPRnet, which launched today. Abu Chadi said the team of political scientists from universities, including Barcelona, Lausanne, Vienna, Zurich, and Berlin, was not aiming to advise or act as political consultants, but to present careful, empirical, data-based research. Faced with a 20-year decline in their vote share, accompanied by rising support for the right, far-right and sometimes far-left social democratic parties across Europe have increasingly sought salvation by moving towards the political centre. One of the most significant preconceptions the team's work had revealed concerns the nature of support for centre-left parties in Europe. According to the analysis, the average social democratic voter today is very, very different from 50, even 20 years ago, and unlikely to be an industrial worker. The data also shows much of this new constituency is actually both culturally progressive and economically left-wing. Abu Chadi said trying to imitate right-wing positions is just not a successful strategy for the left. Bjorn Bremer of the Central European University in Vienna said a survey in Spain, Italy and the UK and Germany and larger data sets from 12 EU countries showed that since the financial crisis of 2008, fiscal orthodoxy had been a vote loser for the centre-left. He went on to say that social democratic parties that have backed austerity failed to win the support of voters worried about public debt and losing the backing of those who oppose austerity. Bremer said centre-left parties that actually impose austerity lose votes. As an example, Bremer cited the UK Labour Party's losing the 2015 election campaign, which focused on fiscal responsibility. When voters really care about fiscal policy, they'll go for the issue owner, in this instance, the Conservatives, who they'll always believe are more credible on that question, he said. Bremer said that offering a contradictory programme that promotes austerity but promises to protect public services and the welfare state and hoping voters will believe that failed in the 2010s and is likely to fail again. Matthias Engest from the University of Lausanne said analysis of data from 8 European countries showed no evidence that welfare chauvinism was a successful strategy for the left. He said that left-wing voters mostly really dislike discrimination between immigrants and nationals. Engest added that voters who do support welfare chauvinism, meanwhile, are likely to not even consider voting for a left-leaning party. Well, that is it for this evening. But before I go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So, to everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, we thank you very much. We now urgently need to raise at least £10,000 to pay our bills within the next 5 days. We have already raised over £2,000 thanks to your generosity. However, we do need to raise the remaining £8,000 immediately if we are to be able to pay our bills and continue making programmes like this one. So please donate whatever you can afford. Good night and thank you for watching.